Let's go find a piece of furniture to flip. This will be a fun one to unpaint. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Have a great day.
You too.
Oh my goodness. This is an Art Deco Waterfall style vanity or dressing table. It would have originally had a giant round mirror that sat in the middle and probably a little stool to sit at while you got yourself ready. These are kind of like the IKEA furniture of their day, affordable and built with economical materials, but they're pretty sturdy and long-lasting pieces if they've been taken care of. They're usually covered with some specialty wood veneers like walnut, mahogany, and rosewood with intricate inlay patterns on the drawers, but I don't know what's hiding under the white paint and Sharpie art on this one. I've worked on a lot of these over the years that I've been flipping, and I've always broken them apart and turned them into a set of tall, thin nightstands because as they are, there's not really a big market for them, but I think for this one, I'll try something different and leave it intact. All of the drawers seem to be in good shape. I mean, they're filthy, but they're functional. And inside the unit looks pretty good too. I'm missing 2 of these metal drawer stops, so I'll need to replace those. I don't think this is lead paint, but it does have kind of a hard enamel feeling to it, so I'm gonna test it just in case. You can get these strips on Amazon. They're really easy to use. You just dip them in a little bit of vinegar until the tip turns that yellowy orange color, and then you rub it on your paint. And if it changes to a purple, pink, or red color, there is lead present, but if it stays this orangey yellow, you're good to go. My entire social media feed is filled with people using Green Easy Stripper. So I ordered some, and I'm gonna test it out for the first time on this, and we'll see if it's as good as everyone's saying. This is a much more eco-friendly paint stripper than the traditional toxic chemical stuff. You still need to wear some good eye protection and gloves with it, but it doesn't have the same caustic chemical fumes as the old-fashioned stuff. It actually kind of smells like licorice. I poured some out into a separate container and then used a brush to apply a pretty thick coat over each surface on the vanity. Says I need to let that sit for 2 to 4 hours. So I guess I'm gonna take the hardware inside and start working on that. I'm 95% sure these poles are solid brass, so I'm gonna soak them in a 50-50 mix of vinegar and hot water and let that cut through the grime for a bit. And then I'll grab a brass wire brush and some barkeeper's friend to scrub off the tarnish and polish them back up. All right, that's been sitting for 3 hours now, so let's see what we got. Okay. I used a putty knife to start scraping up the goop, and I just plopped all the mess into a cardboard box. I could have let this sit on here a little longer and it probably would have done a better job on the tougher spots, but I'm impatient and I've got a lot to do today. I mean, it's not as amazing as I was hoping, but for an eco stripper, can't really be mad at it. Okay, maybe I can be mad at it. It didn't do nothing, but it definitely didn't do what I expect out of a good stripping product. Also important to remember that every paint formulation is going to react a little bit differently. But yeah, I think I'm going to stick to my circa 1850 toxic chemicals. I'm going to clean the rest of this goop off with this Green Easy Strip and Clean after wash, and then I'll let everything dry out again and come back and get the rest with my sander. I ended up putting this scrub brush drill attachment onto my drill to help with the afterwash, and that has made a huge difference in getting the paint and the stripper off of here. I left everything to dry back out for a few hours, and then I plugged in my Surf Prep 3x4 sander, which I can hook up to my shop vac to help with the dust. And I popped some 150 grit sandpaper onto it to start removing the rest of the paint. I thought I had run out of my medium grit sanding sheets that fit this sander, so I was using the ones for my round sander instead, but I did end up finding some more in the cupboard later on. Turns out there isn't any fancy pants wood veneer or inlay work on here, and it doesn't look like it had that traditional Art Deco dark stained finish. It's all maple, which I don't think I've ever seen on one of these before. Sanding off paint like this is going to eat through a ton of sandpaper because the sander just heats it up and melts it, so you've got to keep swapping it out for a new piece pretty often. The side panels and the tops on here are veneer, so I tried to be really careful not to sand too much and end up sanding right through any of it. And for the spots that I couldn't get to with the sander, I just used my carbide scraper to remove the paint. Whew, my hands are starting to go numb. I've made a ton of progress today. I'm really pleased. I've got about half of the main unit completely strip sanded and it's looking good. So I think I'm going to call it a night, and tomorrow morning I can come back out, finish strip sanding the other half of this unit, and the drawers should be dry enough for me to work on them as well. Good morning. I had to knock these drawer stops out of the frame with my hammer so that I could get all the chunky paint cleaned out of here, and I'll just hammer them right back in place when I'm done. There's all of this, I don't know what it is, it's kind of like old rubber cement filling up these seams that I think they probably used to fill them before they painted. But it's yucky, so I'm gonna try and dig as much as I can out with this little dental pick. Once I had all the strip sanding done and had cleaned up the little cracks and seams, I swapped out the 150 grit for some 180 grit to go back over everything and do a finish sand to smooth out the wood and get it ready for some stain. And as I finished sanding each surface, I just wiped it down with some mineral spirits, which cleans off the dust, shows off the actual color of the wood grain, and makes any little sanding swirls stick out so that you can fix them if you need to. I needed to glue a few spots of veneer back down, so I filled up a syringe with some wood glue to help me get under there, and then held all that down with some tape while it dried. Okay, I think this glue should be dry, so I'll get the tape out of the way, and then I'm going to use some of this quick wood. It's a 2-part epoxy wood filler to fill in the missing chunks. This stuff is kind of like Play-Doh. I'm just going to cut off a chunk that's about the size I think I need. And it's got the 2 colors, so you just knead it together until you get one consistent color, and then smush it into whatever you're repairing. Time for more sanding. Okay, vacuum. So this yellowy orange is the natural color of the maple and the color that it will turn if I were to put a sealer on it right now. And it will continue to amber or darken up a little bit over time. But that is not a look that I'm particularly a fan of. But yeah, I'm going to be staining it 100%. As good a time as any to pop off these rusty old casters. So yesterday I went ahead and swatched out a bunch of different stain options with stuff that I've already got on hand. And I think the one that I'm liking the best is up here, which is a base layer of some whitewash, which is just watered down off-white paint. And then layered over top is some of this General Finishes Antique Walnut Gel Stain. I'm gonna work with this one section at a time so that I don't have to worry about anything drying out on me in between. And basically I'm just brushing this way watered down mix of white paint onto the wood, and then I'll take a clean shop rag and wipe back all the excess. here's a good look at the color difference between the whitewash and the bare wood. This is a pretty easy staining technique that you can do with literally any water-based paint, but you want to make sure that when you're wiping it back, you're going in the same direction as the wood grain so that when it's dry, you can't see any streaks of dried pigment on there. All right, I'm gonna leave all this to dry for a few hours and then I'll come back out and do the second layer with that antique walnut to bring everything back to life. So same procedure with this. I'm gonna brush it on and then wipe it back with the paper towel. I am absolutely in love with the way that the stain turned out on these drawers, but even after all of the time and materials that I have invested into stripping, sanding, and picking goop out of seams on the body, please don't hate me. Although, if you're gonna hate me over a piece of furniture, we don't need to be in each other's lives anyway. But I'm gonna paint this. That is just what my creative spirit is telling me needs to happen. Painted body, stained drawers. So, I'm switching gears. These giant gaps were obviously filled in for a reason. And I should have picked up on that faster than I did. This is latex caulking, and it's meant exactly for this, filling in seams and gaps. So I'm just gonna squeeze a bead down each of these and then push it in with my finger and wipe up any excess and just clean it and smooth it down with a damp paper towel. I popped the body up on some old paint cans and then got my primer ready. This shellac-based primer is what I use most often because it does all the things. It blocks in any potential staining from wood tannins that might discolor my paint. It sticks to pretty much any surface, and most paints will stick to it like crazy. It also creates a nice hard shell or candy coating over all of the different textures, like the difference between the wood and the spots of wood filler. I hate the process of cleaning it out of my sprayer though, so I like to roll it on instead, and I just use cheap foam rollers from the dollar store for this. It dries really fast too, so after about 30 minutes, I gave it a quick smooth out with some 400 grit sandpaper, wiped up the dust from that with a microfiber cloth, and then got ready to paint. I've been wanting to use this pretty dusty pink called Damask from Fusion Mineral Paint for a while now. It definitely looks a lot different wet than it does once it's dry, but I strained about half of a pint into my pneumatic spray gun and then added about 2 tablespoons of water to thin it out a bit more. I always test out my spray on a piece of scrap wood or cardboard first to make sure it's all good, but this time I didn't, and I was immediately reminded of why that step is so important. For some reason, the paint was coming out really splattery. I fiddled around with all the knobs on it, but I just couldn't get a smooth spray, so I think I'm gonna need to break it down all the way and scrub this one out better than I usually do and figure out what's going on in here, but I got the first coat on anyway. All right, I'm gonna leave this to dry, but it did not spray smoothly, so hopefully it levels out a little bit as it's drying. I'm gonna have to switch out my gun. Okay, it's 9 o'clock. This first coat is dry and it did definitely level out, which is amazing news, but I am going to swap my paint out into a different gun so that hopefully the second coat goes on a little smoother to start with. Way better. The second coat went on much nicer and just filled in any light areas from the first. I turned on the fan to keep the air moving out here and left that to fully dry overnight. Okay, day 3. Let's do this. Paint is looking fantastic. So now I'm gonna throw some protective top coat on it and hopefully we can get this thing pulled back together by the end of the day. Polyurethane. The Fusion mineral paint that I used is super durable and totally wipeable all by itself. But since this piece is gonna get a lot of traffic and probably be wiped or cleaned a lot more than your average dresser top, I wanted to make sure that it's as tough as possible. So this water-based poly will do that. Again, I strained some of it into my gun, tested out the spray this time on some cardboard, and then moved over to my piece. I sprayed on a total of 3 coats of this over the body and the drawer fronts, waiting about 2 hours in between and giving a wipe down with some fine sandpaper after each coat just to make sure everything stayed really smooth. While that stuff was drying, I also soaked the metal casters in some CLR to break up the rust on there, scrubbed them down with a wire brush, and then sprayed them with some WD-40 to get them all rolling nicely again. They're not perfect, but they still work and they're original. I'm just gonna quickly clean up my little stain mess on the sides of the drawers and then I can pop the hardware back on and we're done. I found this gold framed arched mirror at HomeSense for $50 and I think it's the perfect modern match for this vintage piece. I really love how this turned out with the mix of paint and warm wood tones. When I picked it up from the restore, I had no idea what I was gonna find under the Sharpie art and white paint, but it wasn't too bad under there. If I'd known that I was gonna be repainting it from the start, I probably wouldn't have completely stripped all of the paint off the body. I could have just smoothed it out and then painted over top, but I'm glad I went through the process and cleaned things up anyway. If you're new here, I don't usually sell the pieces that I work on for a profit since I make my money from these videos, but I'm not sure what I should do with this one. I could take it back to the restore and let them resell it, or I could sell it on Facebook Marketplace and donate the profits to another charity. I'd love to hear your ideas on what I should do with this one and also what you think I should list this piece for if I do end up selling it. Anywho, thank you for hanging out with me again as I worked through this one. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day and I will catch you all next time.